When you look closely at the way life unfolds around a narcissist, you begin to see a pattern that is almost archetypal. Jung would say the psyche has a way of revealing what the ego tries to suppress, and this revelation often arrives in the form of consequences. A narcissist survives by constructing illusions. Illusions of superiority, illusions of control, illusions of moral innocence. They curate an image so carefully that they start believing it themselves. But the psyche, much like the divine, does not cooperate with falsehood forever. At some point, the illusion becomes too heavy to maintain, and that collapse is not accidental. It is inevitable. God exposes a narcissist not by striking them down, but by allowing truth to rise. It happens slowly at first. Little inconsistencies break through their story. People they once manipulated begin to see patterns. Their charm, which once carried them so effortlessly, begins to feel forced, even artificial. They sense this shift, and it terrifies them, because exposure threatens the very foundation of their identity. The narcissist is not afraid of being wrong. They are afraid of being seen. What's remarkable is that this exposure is not always external. Often, the first revelation happens within. Their anxiety spikes. Their relationships destabilize. The mask they present to the world refuses to stay in place. And when the world no longer mirrors their grandiosity back to them, the narcissist feels a kind of psychological suffocation. This is where the divine process becomes unmistakable. God doesn't expose them to destroy them. He exposes them to confront them, to force a moment of honesty they have spent a lifetime avoiding. And for those who have been hurt along the way, this exposure is not vengeance. It is clarity. It is the universe's way of saying, you were not crazy, and you were never the problem. If there is one thing a narcissist depends on, it is the constant maintenance of their inflated self-image. Their entire identity is constructed like a fragile monument built on sand. Impressive from a distance, but unable to withstand the weight of real life. Jung often spoke about the swollen ego as a psychological disease, something that inevitably collapses under its own pressure. And this is exactly what happens when God steps back and allows natural consequences to unfold. The narcissist believes they are ascending, but what they're really doing is climbing a staircase they built out of illusions. Eventually, one weak step gives way, and the entire structure begins to fail. There's no lightning bolt, no dramatic punishment. The collapse is subtle, almost quiet. The narcissist starts losing the admiration they once took for granted. People stop responding to their demands. The social energy that used to flow toward them reverses direction. Their tactics no longer yield the same results, and the world no longer bends to their distortions. What they interpret as betrayal is often just the natural response of people who have finally awakened. This collapse is psychological before it ever becomes external. Their ego becomes a burden they can't bear. They grow restless, paranoid, irritated by the slightest resistance. They sense that control is slipping, and that sensation alone is enough to shake the stability of their identity. God doesn't need to intervene dramatically. He simply allows the narcissist's own pride to do the work. Pride isolates them. Pride blinds them. Pride dismantles the very foundation they stand on. And while they fight to maintain the illusion, something profound happens. The people around them begin to rise. The collapse of the narcissist's ego becomes the liberation of everyone else. The weight that crushes the narcissist is the same weight that frees you. One of the most misunderstood aspects of dealing with a narcissist is the quiet, almost invisible way protection arrives. People often expect divine intervention to be loud, forceful, or unmistakably dramatic. But in reality, the psyche and life itself moves with subtle precision. Jung believed that the unconscious compensates for imbalance, guiding us towards psychological wholeness even when we don't realize it. And that is often how God protects the person who has been entangled with a narcissist, quietly, internally, and with perfect timing. Protection doesn't always look like someone stepping in. Sometimes it shows up as a sudden shift inside you, a discomfort that becomes too sharp to ignore, a growing awareness that something is fundamentally off, a sense of inner exhaustion that refuses to be dismissed. These are not random feelings. They are signals. They are the psyche's way of telling you that your spirit is not meant to be dominated, minimized, or consumed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself. The narcissist tried to take. The protection continues in your perceptions. You start seeing patterns you once rationalized. You notice inconsistencies you previously explained away. You're no longer hypnotized by their charm, nor are you flattered by their attention. What you used to interpret as affection, you now see as control. This shift is not just emotional. It is spiritual clarity. It is as if something higher opens your eyes, not to punish the narcissist, but to free you from their illusion. And eventually you find the strength to create distance, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, but always psychologically. That distance is divine. It is the boundary that keeps your soul intact and your identity uncorrupted. When God protects you from a narcissist, the first miracle is not escape. It is awareness. One of the deepest psychological truths Jung emphasized is that no one escapes themselves forever. The ego can create distractions, build personas, and project blame outward, but eventually the unconscious demands recognition. And for a narcissist, this confrontation is inevitable. God doesn't force it violently. He simply removes the noise that allowed them to avoid their inner world. When the applause fades, when their usual targets stop absorbing the impact of their emotional chaos, they are left alone with the very self they've been running from. This confrontation often begins as frustration. Relationships fail in similar patterns. Their attempts to manipulate no longer work with the same precision. They feel misunderstood, unappreciated, even persecuted, not realizing that they are experiencing the consequences of their own behavior. These repeated cycles are not coincidences, they are mirrors. Life holds them accountable by refusing to cooperate with their distortions. What feels like the world turning against them is actually the world reflecting them. And in that reflection, they face what they fear most, the emptiness beneath their inflated exterior. Without an audience, their charm loses purpose. Without someone to blame, their anger turns inward. Without a target for projection, they are confronted with their own insecurities, their own wounds, their own inadequacy. This is where divine psychology becomes unmistakable. God doesn't expose them to shame them. He exposes them so they must acknowledge the parts of themselves they have spent years denying. Some narcissists double down, defending the ego with even greater intensity. Others experience brief moments of introspection that feel almost foreign to them. But regardless of how they respond, the confrontation itself is unavoidable. Life simply stops protecting their illusions. And in that uncomfortable silence, one truth rises above all the noise. There is no escape from the self you refuse to face. One of the most transformative moments in this psychological and spiritual process is when the narcissist loses access to the person they once controlled. Jung often noted that the ego thrives on possession, of attention, of emotional energy, of psychic space. Narcissists rely on that possession more than anyone else. They depend on the emotional fuel you provide, the reactions you give, even the pain they cause. It all keeps their inner emptiness at bay. When God intervenes, that access begins to close, sometimes gradually and sometimes abruptly, and the narcissist feels it like oxygen being cut off. You may not realize it in the moment, but the shift usually starts inside you. Your tolerance for manipulation weakens. Their words stop carrying the same weight. You no longer feel compelled to explain yourself or fix their emotional storms. The hooks they once used so effectively begin to slip out of your psyche. This internal shift is often the first barrier God puts between you and their influence, and it confuses them deeply. They sense a loss of control but can't pinpoint where it began. Then the external world follows suit. Opportunities for them to re-enter your emotional space fall apart. Their attempts to guilt trip, provoke, or reel you back no longer land. Their strategies lose power because you've stepped into a level of self-awareness they cannot manipulate. It isn't anger that blocks them, it's clarity. And clarity is something they cannot penetrate. This disruption is not cruelty, it is protection. It's the universe refusing to allow a toxic bond to continue. It's a psychological boundary reinforced by something higher than your own willpower. And the narcissist feels it as a profound loss, not of you as a person, but of the control they believed was theirs by right. When God cuts off their access to you, He's not punishing them. He's freeing you. One of the most profound aspects of this entire process is the way life restores the person who was harmed. Jung believed that the psyche seeks equilibrium. What was suppressed rises, what was diminished returns, and what was violated eventually regains its rightful place. And this restoration often happens in ways the narcissist never anticipates. They invest extraordinary effort into convincing you that you are inferior, dependent, or incapable. But once you break free from their psychological gravity, something remarkable begins. The very identity they tried to distort starts to rebuild itself from the inside out. This elevation isn't loud or dramatic. It begins quietly, often with self-respect. You start valuing your time again. You reclaim your voice. You rediscover your intuition, which might have been silenced or dismissed for years. You begin making decisions that actually benefit you, not decisions that keep someone else calm or satisfied. These small shifts accumulate until one day you realize you've stepped into a version of yourself. The narcissist worked hard to prevent, and while you're rising, something else happens. The narcissist can no longer follow. They can't access the spaces you grow into, because those spaces require authenticity, empathy, and self-awareness, qualities they refuse to cultivate. The more you heal, the more foreign you become to them. The more you evolve, the more powerless they feel. What they once controlled, they can no longer reach. This elevation is not about revenge, it's alignment. It's you becoming the person you were meant to be before your identity was interrupted. And that transformation alone is a form of divine justice, because nothing disarms a narcissist more than watching the person they underestimated rise beyond their influence. When God restores what a narcissist tried to break, He doesn't just return you to who you were, He elevates you into who you were always meant to become.